Hi guys, welcome back to A Different Life Story, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. It is an absolute honor for me to have a fellow traveler on my show, a woman who has tried to live her life as good as she could, and really with hindsight did the same suicide in installments attempt that so many of us are doing. A woman who has been an overachiever. We all look for the answers at the bottom of the bottle, and this woman really went all out, and I'm very proud of her. I mean, there are certain high experts in our field. Now, may I introduce Sue Curr, who is beaming in here from the UK, which is actually an amazing thing because 8-9 years ago, she was about to beam to other places and has decided, no, it's maybe not. Maybe it's not yet time. And here she is, having undergone a transformation that is, I mean, phoenixes out of the ashes. Forget that. She has done the next level above that. Okay. So Sue, welcome onto my show.
Bless you, Stefan. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's absolutely a pleasure, complete pleasure to be here.
Indeed. Oh, thank you so much. So it is, we are both alcoholics. We are both living this life now, having completely transformed and having transcended the darkness, and now both bringers of light. We are so beautiful in what has occurred to us, has shaped us. It doesn't define us, our past, but it has given us the power now to do other things. But in order to go through all that shit and come out the other end, you have to start somewhere. So let's go back when you were a little girl. Did you wake up one day and say, I want to become an alcoholic? I think that sounds really, really good.
I actually can say categorically no, but I can also say, but by the same token, I don't know what it was like in the area of the world where you grew up, but in the area where I grew up in Northern England, in the UK, it was standard practice to dip a baby's dummy in a glass of whiskey and put the dummy in their mouth when they were teething. My father came to tell me quite late on in life that actually it never did you any harm. You went straight to sleep when I did that. You know, it soothed your teething. And I actually remember saying to him, actually, no, Dad, it didn't. It got me pissed. I was maybe 6 months old and I was pissed on whiskey and nobody knew. So no, I don't think anybody consciously sets out. I have a saying, a mantra, if you like, that the chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they're too strong to be broken.
It's beautiful.
And certainly as a 6-month-old baby suckling on a pacifier that's doused in whiskey, that clearly was never on my agenda for life. But maybe life had other intentions for me. Clearly, it turned out that it did.
When you grew up, so the whiskey was around. So were your parents drinking a lot?
My mum was teetotal almost, to my knowledge. Even as an adult, I don't remember her drinking very much at all. Dad was a different kettle of fish. He was an atypical Yorkshireman. He was a miner. He worked hard. He played hard. He never missed a day's work in his life and was proud of that. But he would once he'd left the mines, and he went into steel working. And as a steel worker, they worked a shift pattern that was a 3-week rotation. Mornings, they started early mornings. Afternoons, they started midday. Nights, they worked overnight. And he called the afternoon shift the dead man's shift, because in those days, he meant he started work before the pubs opened, but he finished work after they closed. And his analogy of that was he hated that 3rd week in every month because it was a dead man's shift, and all he could do was have a drink at weekends. So alcohol was very present in our lives through the way my father lived his life, but not to the degree that it caused him any great stress or problem, as far as I'm aware. It was just more typical of the era that we were living in, the 60s.
Exactly right, and I think that needs to be accepted. Different norms, different lives that people lived, where smoking was not frowned upon. Everyone was smoking, where alcohol was part and parcel of it. And if you were not drinking, then you were a real anomaly in that society. And that's true, and that applies to Yorkshire, that applies to the north of England, that applies to Germany probably just as much. I mean, alcohol certainly was around myself. It was normal to have alcohol there, and people were, children would get a sip of the wine. People, it was all part and parcel, and I don't think there was any bad intentions from our parents. On the contrary, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were. So, and I think that needs to be recognized nowadays. We can't judge our parents by today's standards. That's
absolutely. It was a different time and place. And I always say the people I work with these days, I always say the thing is, none of us know what we don't know. They did the best they could with what they had.
Exactly.
We as parents, I'm a parent in turn, and my children are parents. Each generation of parents do the best they can with what they've got at that time.
Exactly.
And like you said, there is no judgment. I mean, there was an element of judgment attached to the way I grew up, because although my mother wasn't a drinker, my mental health career, as I came to call it, started in childhood. At best I was tolerated. At worst, I was a whipping post, and not much in between. So the mental ill health began quite early on, in that I became a people pleaser, saying yes when no would have sufficed, and that's that sort of that learned behaviour pattern became a repetitive cycle throughout my life. It was something that I thought for a very long time. In fact, I thought until circa 8.5 years ago, I thought it was something that was impossible to unlearn. I learned very quickly in my very rapid decline in the end that actually, if I didn't learn, I'm pretty damn quick, then I actually wasn't going to be around very much longer. So it's amazing how quickly you can learn something when your very life depends on it, and you actually realize that you want to keep that life. You actually don't want to throw it away. It's been a steep learning curve in this last 8 years, that is for sure.
You spoke so out of my heart. But let's go back again. It is when you then grew up a little bit older. How you didn't have a happy childhood. So what did you do in order to escape from that childhood?
I have to say, I think overall my childhood, I was there was an area of my childhood that wasn't happy. I was very blessed to be surrounded by loving grandparents on either side of the family, and an extended family, and a father that loved all his children. I'm the elder of 4 siblings, so for me there was just a little sort of an itch that I couldn't scratch. But in terms of escapism, if that's what you mean, one of my grandmothers taught me how to read when I was around about 4 years old. And by the time I was 12, I'd read all of Dickens. Wow. I'd read Brave New World. I'd read Jane Eyre, and so on and so forth. So my escapism, if you like, came through the love of both the written and the spoken word, sort of diaries, little girls' diaries. You keep it. Nobody can read your deepest, darkest secrets and all that business. And it's something that never left me. I have an inherent love of both the written and the spoken word, and as things have turned out, it's the spoken word that's become an integral part of my life these days. So yeah, for me, the escapism was, because these were the days, obviously, pre more than 2 channels on your TV at tops. The TV channel went off at 10:30 at night. There was no sort of multi-hundred channels to choose from, no Netflix, no nothing to escape into. So books were the only source of escapism for a working class girl in Northern England in the 60s. And I became a voracious reader, which I think served me in good stead, to be fair.
Oh, beautiful, isn't it? Exactly.
One of my favourite books that I ever read as a small child, or a smaller child, was Little Women. I remember reading Little Women and identifying with the not with the poverty as such. We weren't poverty stricken, but we weren't a rich family, and I could identify with lots of the ideals within that was certainly evidenced in my own life. And when you begin to see parallels between fantasy and fiction, as you grow older, if you don't remember to distinguish between the two, the edges of your lives get blurred, and sort of reality fades into illusion, shall we say, or the other way around. And and we very quickly, certainly in my case, I very quickly came to wear the badge of the story I was telling myself as my badge of wounded honor. This happened to me, and therefore my mental health wasn't my fault. And if my mental health is not my fault, then my increasing dependency on alcohol isn't my fault, and therefore they can go screw themselves and I can have another drink because it's not my fault. Hello. Ding dong.
That's right. Because what you have done to me, I show you. I will now drink a whole bottle of vodka. I'll show you. Yeah, about that. Exactly.
Oh.
When did alcohol start coming into your story? When did you start using it for its perceived benefits?
Okay. That's an easy one for me, because it actually was at a time when I was a very good girl. I didn't even think about dabbling in it until I legally turned age in this country, which at that time was 18. So that would have been 1978. And I remember going out and having I was out with friends. My very first ever alcoholic drink in a bar somewhere in the town where I live was half of lager with a splash of lime, circa as a typical late 70s, early 80s drink. And I liked the taste of it. And I had one, and then I had another, and that was fine, and I liked it, and it was enjoyable, but it wasn't an issue. But once I started the world of work officially, after studies and things had finished around about that time, it very quickly became the norm to go to the pub with your colleagues after work, have a couple of beers, weekends, lunchtimes, and I met my now husband in 1977 as a sort of very free-spirited 17-year-old, and very quickly after I became of drinking age, we would go out as a couple on Friday nights and Saturday nights. It then expanded from Saturday nights, Sunday lunchtime, Sunday nights, but it was still only ever socially, and it wasn't an issue. I knew when to stop. But maybe about 6 months or so after I'd sort of started my drinking career, as I came to call it, I had the first of 4 in my life in total. I had my first of 4 nervous breakdowns. I didn't know I was having a nervous breakdown at that time. I didn't feel well. I was stressed. I was anxious. And my parents said, "You're 18 now. We can't take you to the doctors. You need to go and see the doctor. You need to go and see him and sort yourself out, because clearly something's wrong." I kid you not, Stefan, I was in there all of 5 minutes. I landed back on the pavement with a green prescription slip in my hand, and his words ringing in my ears, which simply were, "Take 2 of these twice a day, and in 6 weeks you'll be as right as ninepence," which means you'll be really well. That man was an absolute genius. He was elevated to God status very quickly in this 18-year-old's mind. I was incredibly happy. I was upbeat. I was very on point with everything. What I didn't realize was I was also as high as a kite, because what he'd given me was a prescription for diazepam, what we now call diazepam. Take 2 of these twice a day, morning and night, and you'll be right. I was as high as a freaking kite, and I had no idea. I was 18 years old. I didn't know. But what he didn't, but what he didn't tell me was, after 6 weeks, you need to come back and we'll review your meds and/or start to wean you off them. So this 18-year-old did exactly as she was told. The prescription ran out. I was happy. I was cool. Everything was fine. And I crashed and burned like I've never crashed and burned. What I didn't know was the dosage was so high that I should have been weaned off it slowly but surely. And I actually thought I'd lost my mind. I was in a right state. It triggered, to cut a long story short there, it triggered in me 2 things. A deep mistrust in doctors, one of my grandmothers had always said, you never argue with a doctor, a lawyer, or a policeman. They always tell you the truth, was the family mantra growing up on that one. So I didn't think to question. I didn't think to go back. I was 18 and very naive. And it triggered in me a mistrust in medics, so that I thought, right, clearly he does not know what he's talking about. He's not a god after all. I'll manage somehow. And over the years, that triggered in me, I'm not going back for any more of that rubbish. It made me ill, so I'll have a drink. I really can't cope, so I need to go back, and it'd be another prescription with a different tablet. And it triggered this stop-start cycle of tentative management from my GP in terms of my mental health, and very definitely increasingly more so self-medicating in a way that made me feel good. And yes, I might have a bit of a headache by this time, when I woke up the next day, but it was just a headache and I could cope. And the cycle became, over the years, increasingly steep and increasingly downward at a rate of knots. By the time I was 52, I was at the end of nervous breakdown number 4, and I was drinking 5 bottles of wine per day, every day. I was on 17 different pills and potions, ironically, totaling 17 different prescriptions, totaling 44 different pills and potions for all manner of things that go with being clinically obese, because I was also 7.5 stone, which is circa 100 pounds in weight, heavier than I am now. It wasn't a pretty sight at all. And I was morbidly obese. I had Crohn's disease. I had high blood pressure. I was on danger of stroking out. And I subsequently found out, coming back to the triggering of mistrust in medics, that 4 or 5 of the prescriptions that I was taking legally at that time, not that I ever took any prescriptions illegally, but the prescribed drugs, 4 of the prescriptions at least were toxic when prescribed together. That contributed to the demise of my liver, courtesy of the other input, completely self-induced by myself. 5 bottles of wine a day, every day, for at least 4 years towards the end. I was never sober for at least 5 years.
Exactly.
Mad.
Bloody hell. Did the pain go away with that?
By the time it got to that stage, I actually wasn't consciously aware that I was actually trying to rid myself of any pain. I think I'd just gone too far down the rabbit hole. I know I'd gone too far down the rabbit hole. I was no longer thinking about the past at that point. All I was thinking about at that point was the future and where I would get my next drink. Period. I mean, on the day that I went to my GP, which was 26th of September 2012, I went for the last, I didn't know it was going to be the last at that point, but I went for the last in an increasingly long line of routine blood tests, because she knew that my liver was in trouble. And I went to see her. I sat down in front of her at 9:30 in the morning. It was a Wednesday. She looked at me. She looked at the computer screen. She picked her phone up, and I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm phoning for an ambulance." And like an idiot, I went, "Who for?" I literally looked over my shoulder. I was still in that much of a denial. The last words I remember her saying are, "For you, you're in big trouble. Your liver's decompensated. It's failing. You need to go to hospital, and you need to go now." At that point, I'd already had my first bottle of wine for the day, and I was halfway down the second, which I'd left on the side. And the only goal I had in my brain until she delivered that verdict was, I need to go home and finish my wine. I subsequently found out that if I hadn't gone to see her that morning for my blood results, 24 hours later, I actually literally would have been dead. It was that bad. All my readings were off the freaking chart. She admitted me to the local hospital, which I vaguely remember. And I woke up 5 days later in a different hospital. I've got the vaguest of memories of being stark naked on a bed with nothing on, literally no sheet allowed over me, with a fan either corner of the bed blowing freezing cold air on me because I was in danger of stroking out. I was that ill. And that's the only thing I can remember of those 5 days. the consultant, I mean, there is no doubt what happened during those 5 days, apparently, was I was actually physically, chemically detoxed. So when I was compos mentis enough to realize that actually I was still conscious and, more importantly, still alive, and realize where I was, day 5 in, the consultant came to see me, sat down, and he said to me, "You are a very sick young woman." And I laughed, and he looked at me and he said, "Did you hear what I said?" And I said, "Yeah, you called me young. I'm 52. I'll take that as a compliment." Even then, I'm batting it away with humor, because that's my default setting. I mean, I used to say, "Of course I've got a drink problem. I've got 2 hands, 1 mouth. That's a hell of a problem." And he just looked at me and he said, "I'm not joking. You're not out of the woods. You won the battle, but you haven't won the war. You're still dying." And at that point, Stefan, I remember looked at my watch, and I just remember saying to him, "I don't have time." And he said, "Time for what? Did you not hear what I just said?" And I said, No. I heard what you said, but I don't have time. I don't have time to do all the things I'd promised myself that I would do, that I never did. Jump out of an airplane on a skydive, go to India, do this, do that. And all this stuff that I hadn't thought about in donkey's years came spilling out. And having delivered his verdict, he stood up and he left. He is still, I mean, I'm still under his care now, almost 9 years later, because I have end stage cirrhosis of the liver, but I refuse to acknowledge it. You know, I just think, that's it. It's behaving itself. It's behaving as though it's not cirrhotic, because that's the way I'm working it with my mind. But he left, and I'm pretty certain that, medical intervention aside, the fact that he told me that day, as bluntly as he did, that I was still going to die, I'm pretty sure that did more for my mindset than absolutely anything. Because there's one thing you don't tell a hard-headed Yorkshire lass when she's been brought up to look after herself and failed to do it, and know that everybody now knows that she failed, then throw a challenge down and tell me that you're not going to make it, you're going to die. And I remember in the split second that he delivered it, thinking, I've got no idea if, how, or when I'll get out of this pickle, but if I do, something's got to change. It's got to change for the better forever, not only for me and my family, but somehow intuitively I knew I'd pay that forward. And yet I didn't have a roadmap. I didn't have a plan. And at that moment in time, I didn't even have a life, because he'd just told me I was dying. You know, but it's like Bob Proctor, an American writer and coach, says that, you know, when we experience a paradigm shift, then we are more open to effecting the changes that we need. And for people that don't know what a paradigm shift is, it's when something happens in your world, and your world literally tilts on its own axis. And after that event, you know that you will not see or hear anything in the same manner again. My worldview changed. My worldview of me changed. My worldview of the world changed. And everything that went with me, or had come with me, I should say, to that far from the past, to that point in my present, that moment in time, I decided to leave the past where it needed to be, which was way in the past. It had long ago ceased to serve me, and I made an active choice to take only the lessons I'd learned from that past into my then present. And God willing, I made a promise that they would be the only things that I used as a springboard to take me into my future, were I ever to make it that far. And that sort of brought me ultimately to doing interviews like this today, and writing my blogs and social media posts, and working with people who have an it, not necessarily an addiction, but we all have an it. That sort of itch that we can't scratch, yet we can't stop, or we can't start, despite all our best intentions and the promises we make to ourselves. And addicts the world round will understand it when you know, I'll stop tomorrow. I'll stop on Monday. I can't not have a drink at the weekend, so I'll stop on Monday. What, a sober Christmas and New Year? Nah, I'll stop on 1st of January. And never's a long time. But speaking as somebody that, and it never happened, but speaking as somebody who's literally stared the Grim Reaper in the face and declined his offer to join him, there isn't a day that goes by now that I'm not grateful to be here. And that gratitude it shows itself in many ways. But in all honesty, would I ever, ever, ever go back to where I once was? Absolutely not. Under no circumstances. I can't do that. I can't. It just can't happen anymore. I value my own life too much. I value my own life too much.
I think the reality is that right now it's what, 6 o'clock or shortly after 6 here in the morning, and my brain is probably not on its top function. I'm probably running at 80% or so, something like that.
Yeah.
But even those 80% are laser sharp compared with the fog that I've been living in, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, to actually take that away from me would be such a painful thing to do. No. This energy that lives in me now, that is so powerful and is driving me forward to explore new areas in my life, explore some of the dodgy things in my life as well. I mean, it is so beautiful to go back, in your own words, to actually numb that all again, because that's what we were doing, just numbing it, and you live in your past suddenly, and in the past in the sense of,
absolutely.
I would drink. I had 2 bottles of wine, a bit more, and then I would feel relaxed. Then I would listen to music, and in my mind, I'm 21 again, and all that. This is right now. I much rather look at the person I am right now, however imperfect, however obese, however unfit, however that wreck here is alive with so much energy and power and beauty inside. It's gorgeous. I love this man, and this is something I could have never ever said 9 years ago. I love you.
I'm exactly the same. Oh. Yeah, I put a post out with I use before and after photographs for me quite a lot across social media. The before photos, I say to people, please feel free to copy that and put it in the windows. It'll put burglars off. Don't worry. Nobody wants to break in your house if you put that in your window. But I put a meme up. I sort of do collage of before and after, and I put a header across it. The header said something along the lines of, I love this woman, and underneath it was, I fought hard to become her. Because somebody asked me a little while ago if I could go back to the very first half a lager and lime that I ever drank. Incidentally, 6 months after starting to drink lager and lime, I ditched the lime because somebody had convinced me that it was the additives in the lime that was giving me a headache. That's how far back my denial goes, to 1978 and the lime cordial.
Oh,
I'm not even joking there. But the answer to that question was, actually, no, I wouldn't. I would still repeat the mistakes that I made from day one, because the person that was making those mistakes, I don't recognize. I see her in the pictures, but I don't feel her in here. Mm. That person, I didn't like. I certainly didn't love her, and I definitely wasn't proud of her. This person, warts and all, my perfectly imperfect self, is somebody I'm damn proud to be. So I now know, with the benefit of hindsight and medical intervention, I now know that this person is the person that, not who I was meant to become. This person is the person I always was, but never had the balls or the courage to show the world. And now I show the world, and if you don't like me, thank you very much. But that's of no consequence to me. I appreciate your honesty, and I totally get that I'm Marmite. I totally get that. And if I'm not your cup of tea, fine, have a nice life. because it no longer, the opinions of other people no longer have any pull on my psyche.
People pleaser.
Absolutely.
The pendulum has swung.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I go out of my way still to help people,
Yeah.
but it's on my terms, not theirs.
Yeah.
In terms of, and I don't mean that in a selfish way, but if I genuinely do not have the time to help somebody, it's always I can't actually do that just yet, but I promise you I'll come back to you and we can do it on. If I make a commitment, then I follow it through. You know, and as you well know, that might take 3 or 4 attempts, but nevertheless, I have the courage of my convictions, and I make it happen. But there have been a lot of habits of thought that I've left by the wayside over the last 9.5 years. I don't know about you, Stefan, but I've still got a way to go. I'm still very much a work in progress. There are still days when I think, oh my Lord, she's not replied to my email yet. Why has she not replied to my email? Or did he really say that? What did he mean by that? And then I have, as my dad would have said, Susan, have a stern word with yourself and sort yourself out. So I do. I talk to myself quite a lot. It makes interesting listening sometimes. Sometimes it is actually complete insanity, but I'm used to that, so it's okay.
Do you speak out loud when you talk to yourself?
Oh Lord, yeah. But that's the benefit these days of earbuds and mobile phones, because everybody thinks you're talking to somebody else.
It's sometimes amazing when you talk things out loud, and that's something I've realized by doing this talk show here, or this being a host. You during these interviews, you say things, and your ears hear that and say, "What?" And suddenly you have peeled off another layer of the onion, which you actually hadn't looked underneath before. And you think, okay. And you think you had dealt with something, and then boom, there we are. And it's amazing. That's where the writing comes in, the spoken, the written word. The journaling I've restarted doing that myself in a little bit more seriousness, actually just making a point, free writing, speed writing, just write what comes out. And you suddenly look down and think, damn, okay, where did that come from? Exactly. Amazing. And I had a few surprises like that in the last 2 months, and it is what it is. It just shows that we are work in progress, and I love that the way you've described yourself and me in that note, because there are constantly new challenges. That's what life is all about, and some challenges that blindsided you, that you didn't see coming, and they still are there. And how do you deal with it? And the last 2 months were not pretty in my life. So I actually had to retract into a survival mode and drop a lot of things here and there in order to keep myself sane and just accept what it was and deal with things. I have done so, and I've done so in a way that with hindsight, Christ, had those 2 months occurred 8 years, 10 years ago, I would have been plastered. I would have drunken the whole bottle shop, and I would have not dealt with a fraction of what I have actually actively dealt with now. And it's beautiful. So remember, guys,
it's still painful. It's still painful, though, isn't it? We deal with the stuff, and it's funny you should said that about peeling back the layers of the onion. I use that analogy all the time. You peel them back, and it's not until you get to the bit in the middle that always makes you cry, that green crunchy bit that nobody eats. But when you hit it, it makes you bawl your eyes out. You realize you've hit the sweet spot of whatever it is that needed to be uncovered at that point. But I just interrupted you there, and I apologize, but I did some work with a group last week, and it was all surrounding money mindset and this, that, and the other. And the first exercise that we had to do was write down, without thinking about it, going back to what you were saying about journaling, our 10 money mantras that we remember inheriting from childhood. And I just jotted down. My dad used to say things like, "Who do you think I am, Rockefeller?" Okay, so that went down. And things like that, they all went down. And I wrote this one sentence out, and then I carried on the sentence, knowing that I'd got to hand this into a public group. I carried on the sentence in block capitals after I'd finished it, which said, "For Jesus Christ, I've not thought about that for at least 50 years. And the sentence I'd written was, we never had any money growing up, but yet there was always money for cigs and alcohol. In my drinking years, it didn't matter which pill didn't get paid. If I had no money for anything else, I would make sure I had a drink." And I'd not thought about that in 50 years. So the childhood and environmental conditioning from my childhood, actually, even on the most subconscious of levels, has a lot to answer for.
And it's beautifully said, because you call it conditioning. That's right, the programming that is underlying our emotions. That is happening as a child, like it or lump it. And it is something that we often don't approach. I'm now in my 7th year, day 2558, I think it's today. So, and I'm proud of that. And I worked on my negative emotions, and I worked on all the reptilian brain. I thought, yeah, you're doing it well, cool, look at you. And more recently, I am working with a coach, and she is basically looking at exactly this programming, this what is actually causing the pattern of negative emotions, what is actually causing the shame and guilt that has been there throughout your life. What is why are you thinking the way you think? And it's quite interesting to ask yourself those questions and try to figure out, what the hell, why? Because sometimes when you actually literally spell it out and you look at it, either listen to it or read it, you think, what a heap of bullshit. Where's that coming from?
But it's in there somewhere. What I know now is that everything that ever happens to us, everything, things we see, hear, smell, speak, have spoken to us, our unconscious mind never, ever, ever forgets it. But it's called an unconscious for a reason, because 99.9% of what goes into our unconscious brain, we never, ever need. The unconscious mind is totally unresponsive to everyday life, but it's totally driving everything we do. It's like this with the subconscious. Bump. For instance, if we take racism as a prime example, a child does not grow up to be racist. Ever. No child is ever born a racist. It learns how to become so. And as an adult, that might go one way or the other. He may remain a racist, or he may not. He may have made his own choices. But whenever a racist, for argument's sake, or an alcoholic has that urge to insult somebody or have a drink, somewhere in our unconscious mind, there's a little prod going to the subconscious going, she doesn't do that, i.e. she doesn't not have that drink. Remind her to have another drink. She doesn't not have a drink. Or, oh, you've seen somebody of a different colour. Remind her to be insulting. I liken our minds to a computer. The conscious mind is the operating system. It's the Google or the Microsoft of the brain. The subconscious is the hard drive where we keep all the subfolders, the stuff we need to know every day, like remembering how to drive the car when we get into it. And the unconscious mind is our recycle bin. Everything that we ever do, experience, etc., gets dropped in there, and it only ever surfaces, or resurfaces, I should say, as a product of self-discovery, like you and I are both going through, even now. And the coach that I was working with last week said to me, there is so much more to be uncovered from your unconscious brain. You are going to be a work in progress for a very long time. To which my answer was, well, I hope I have long enough left to live to find it all out then.
Well, exactly right.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? It is. Here we are. We too have different genders. We come from very different countries. There are so many differences. Yet, fundamentally, we are close as siblings from the way we have been programmed, from the way certain things have been placed in our subconscious. And it's nuts. It's crazy to actually just realize that. So, guys, I mean, there's a reason that you are out there listening to that. So, welcome to the club. Welcome to the club of people who are just sort of starting to explore their own mind, and it's a bloody minefield. Okay,
it absolutely is.
It's and you. I mean, often enough, I'm tap dancing on that minefield, and it is just bloody hell. When you start exploring, things go boom. Okay, there are
it's having the ability these days in sobriety, isn't it, to recognize something that's just gone boom, equally as quickly recognize that actually your default setting is no longer to go have a drink, and then very closely followed by, pardon my French, what the f- just happened? Oh, right. And then, why am I reacting like this?
Exactly.
Why is that? What is the default setting that's still there that I thought I'd got rid of? Because, I said to somebody the other day, listen, you're not much younger than I am. I turned 61 in April. And I said to you, you're not much younger than I am. Just remember how many bloody years it took you to develop that habit. You can't realistically expect to unpick it within a week or 2 weeks.
That's right, yeah.
You have to put some hard work in. Yeah. And I can honestly say I've never seriously considered having a drink in the last 8.5 years almost. But there have been times of immense stress in my life, where I have literally jumped in my car, driven off out into the country, stormed into a pub, a really sleepy pub where nobody knows me, and I've marched up to the bar and I've slammed my money on the table, and then I've stood there drumming my fingers on the countertop going, just a minute, with the bartender looking at me enough to say, okay, crazy lady. And then I've gone, Diet Coke, no ice, don't put ice in my drink. And he's then decided I am actually really crazy. So he's tentatively given me my Diet Coke without any ice. I've drunk it in one fell swoop and I've left. I've not done that for a while, but I realized in the early days, I didn't trust myself. And I had to be where somebody didn't know me, just in case I did fall off the wagon. But I'm proud to say that, fingers crossed and touch wood and everything else, that thus far my resolve stands strong, even in times of stress. And you know what? I'm like you, I'm only human, but it doesn't mean that I don't think about it. What?
I'm laughing because I had exactly the same experience recently. I wanted, the alcohol is no longer an issue, but sugar is still an issue. So I said, fuck it, I want a cheesecake, not just a slice, I want a cheesecake. So I drove to the cheesecake shop here that we've got in town, and I stood there for 5 minutes. And then I said, no, thank you very much. And I walked back out. And exactly, the salesperson probably thought, what the heck? And it was exactly that. So sometimes I didn't actually drive to another town to not be seen eating a cheesecake. We're not this bad here. But the bottom line is, yes, same thing. Yeah. It is. And sometimes you have to explore that. And sometimes you have to really feel it, smell it, do it, and then say, actually, no, I do not wish to go back. And that basically is a very powerful position that you put yourself in.
I think when we realize, yes, absolutely. Not only is it a choice, when we realize actually that finally we can largely trust ourselves to make the right choices, then the courage to carry on and do the other things that we previously had perhaps discounted because we didn't trust ourselves, they become far more easier to achieve. And for me, all achievement starts in here. It starts in here. I say to people, I'm on a mission to take people from fear to freedom, which sounds a cliche, and then I further expand by saying no. I mean to take you from living a life where you are looking at your life through a lens of fear, which is driven by the anxiety in a mind that is yours alone to control, turning that lens around and seeing the opportunity that life is, and moving from a fear-based way of living to living freely where it counts the most, which is inside the mind that is yours alone to control, and create the life that is yours alone to live, regardless of what Joe Public thinks.
and that's so important, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
many guests I talk to have been people pleasers. They have been trying to do everything for everyone and completely lost themselves in the process. And I was not much different. I was, if you asked me 8 years ago, who are you? I would have said, oh, I'm a pain physician, I'm an anesthetist. Yeah, no, who are you? No, I just told you. I could only identify with the work that I was doing, 16 hours a day, for crying out loud. That didn't help. But I had lost myself in that way. I'd forgotten who I was. And then when I came into rehab and thereafter, with hindsight, there was this blank canvas where I could reinvent myself. And that is actually so beautiful, so exciting, exhilarating, mind-blowing, what I did. And I followed my heart. And it was bizarre. The journey that came out of that is out of this world. So guys out there, if you listen to that, listen to my voice, listen to that. This is not me on speed. This is me having just realized this opportunity that the universe or God or whoever is out there has given me to recreate myself and to transform myself into that person that deep inside I deserved and wanted to be. And that I, due to circumstances, sometimes in my control, sometimes beyond my control, was never actually going for. But once you actually strip yourself naked to the bone, when you actually put big, strong searchlights into your soul and start working with the shit that is in there, with the programming, work with the emotions that are there, try to figure out, first of all, accept them, that they are there, try to figure out why they are there, and then actually do something about them. Do the new micro habits, do the new things that you suddenly are no longer eaten by shame and guilt about the behavior patterns that you do, the hiding. I mean, how much hiding did you do? Out of interest. At the end, did you still hide your wine bottles? Did you?
I was never, ever a secret drinker, ever. I used to come home from work. I was a bit like Sue Ellen in Dynasty in the late 80s, early 90s. I'd walk in through the back door, I'd throw my keys on the counter, I'd pick up a bottle and I call my husband by his name, clearly not by the name JR. And I would drink while I was having dinner. And by the time it got to the end, by the time it got to sort of 2012, I'd be coming home from work and I knew there were bottles in the house. Or at least there had been when I went to work that day. It was my husband that was hiding the bottles and pouring them down the sink and stuff like that. So I was it was Sheffield where I lived at that time, which is the fourth largest city in the UK. I was Sheffield's biggest open secret. There was only me that didn't know that everybody else that I knew actually knew I was a roaring drunk. One of the first things that hit me when Prof. Gleason told me that why I was there and all that business, the first moment of shame that I remember was, oh my God, everybody's going to know. Seriously? There wasn't anybody that didn't know me, and plenty of people who actually did not know me at all that didn't know that I was an absolute roaring drunk, and my denial was such that I had it under control. Nobody could tell that I was drunk. Nobody knew that I was drinking this much. We have recycling bins here in this country just for glass.
Yeah.
And everybody, and I mean literally everybody on our street knew it was recycling day when my bin was emptied. Because it was all glass and it was all wine bottles and still the denial was nobody will know. Now they're going to know because I'm in hospital. No, I think a couple of wine plantations went bust in the 6 weeks I was in hospital, to be fair, but
I hear you, girl. I hear you.
Yeah.
So no, but then again, it is what you've described is 95% of alcoholics will deny that they have got a problem. And we are some of us are high functioning. or were high functioning at the height of their game. But I debate that this is truly a high function, or we were just functioning. That's probably
hanging on by a thread.
You're lucky that you haven't had your driving under influence DUI. You were lucky.
I actually don't know how. I do not know how I got away with that. Honestly, I don't know. But it's more by good luck than by design, and I don't say that proudly. I say that with much shame on that respect, because you know the thought that I could have killed innocent people, conceivably, even now fills me with horror.
Exactly.
But we can't undo the past, and I don't live there anymore. So it's we
that's true.
We know when we know better, we do better, and that's a mantra that I live by. And I don't beat myself up about it anymore. The past, forgiving. I don't know about you, Stefan, but for me, a large part of moving on from the past was not just forgiving the past and the person in it and all that business that I blamed, but forgiving myself for my part in that. You know, I was as a child, I was a complete innocent. I didn't have any control over the things that happened to me at the hands of one particular person. However, as a person who morphed into adulthood very early, I was very mature in my head intellectually, circa 16, 17, and definitely by the time I was 18 and started drinking. I was so focused on a past that had so long ago ceased to serve me, that I actually forgot to take responsibility, not only for the choices that I was making, which were quite poor, but also their consequences. That, for me, in the early days of my recovery, circa 2012, it was a hell of a wake-up call, a light bulb moment, if you like. And I go, oh my God, if I'd have only taken responsibility for that first hangover I ever had, or the first time I had more than one bottle of wine and realized the red flag, you know, didn't see it as a green light to have another one because I was enjoying it so much. If I'd only taken, but if onlys don't change the world. If onlys don't change the world, it's what we do today that dictates the future, not what happened in the past.
Absolutely. And that is so important. I mean, right now, we have got choices. Right now, the sheer fact that two of us are opening our soul and discussing these things means that we actually relive some of our emotions. And then after this discussion, there will be a moment of soul searching in my mind, and I will be extremely grateful. And that's inevitably happens after every single interview. I mean, I'm so grateful to people like you, to my guests who are holding the mirror in front of my face and who allow me to explore again the past, but more as in not, oh my God, look what you did, take the whip out and whip myself, but rather, I remember. Yeah. But the past does not equal the future. And it is that beautiful mantra that is so powerful. No, whatever the past was, it doesn't define me. It propels me forward. It's the catalyst for me to do other things nowadays. I would have been going back to bed after anything in the morning and with a massive hangover, and I probably, until 4:00 this afternoon, then I would have had a short moment of, okay, I will not drink. And then by 6:00, I would say, oh, come on, just one. And then by 2:00 in the morning, I would be dancing and having a good time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And nowadays, I will finish this interview. I will have some breakfast. I will then go out and do my hobby and have a ball of a time, do some physical exercise. And it is just such a different life. But it's a life that I choose to live. There is no longer that demon that drives me like a jockey on my back, where I'm the horse with the blinkers. No, it is just so beautiful. And I want to invite all of you out there to come onto that journey. And it's a journey that hurts. It's a journey that equally is so fulfilling and cheesy and corny at times, because it is so, there are such beautiful moments there where you think, damn, this is just not true. This is just, oh. So guys, please, 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 if Sue can get her shit together, if I can get my shit together, really, what stops you? Do you really think that your circumstances are so unique that it's impossible to put a stop to your behavior? And just make that little choice today. Just make that little choice of an action right now that is maybe a bit different than the choices that you've made so far.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So it is, we all have got those same seconds in the day. We all choose what we do each and every moment. It's full of choices. And nowadays, I choose to love myself. However crap that sounds, however corny that might sound in your ears, it still sounds shit in my ears. I do admit that. But because of that, I'm using it. I'm using it because that's what I truly want to do. I want to love myself. So why does it sound shit in my ears? Do I not deserve love? So there's the programming happening here as I speak. Why does it sound crazy that I want to love myself?
Only sounds crazy to us.
Well, exactly. It's so bizarre. And here we would do everything for our children, grandchildren, whatever, you know, for everyone else, we're doing everything. But for ourselves, oh God, we're self-destructive we're weapons of self-destruction, as Robin Williams put it so perfectly in one of his shows.
Yeah.
Hell. So, I mean, you nowadays you have come this far out that you started to give back. When did that journey actually start? So you were on death's door in 2012.
Yeah.
What happened there?
2012, I spent 6 weeks in hospital fighting for my life, literally. I went home just before Christmas that year. And I spent maybe about 18 months just recovering, getting well physically. But this part of my life didn't actually start until towards the end of 2017.
Wow.
So not quite 4 years. And I'm loving it. It's every day is different. Nothing's ever the same. And I live my life these days in glorious technicolor. Instead of existing shadows of a grayed out mind that long ago relinquished its control to the bats in the belfry. They've gone now, and now I see life for the wonderful opportunity that it is.
Yeah, guys, just check Sue's Instagram account out. There's the before and after pictures there. Always put a smile on my face, because there is it just shows such a transformation. And sometimes you don't see transformations as obvious, but with you, it's bloody black and white, for crying out loud. You lost how many pounds?
Circa 100, 7.5 stone.
A stone is 6.6 kilograms, so that gives you that. Oh, bloody hell. So yes, you changed your life very, very actively. And it is amazing what a good nutrition, what some exercise, and what the right things.
I learned very early on, Stefan, that self-care is an act of sanity, not vanity.
Exactly. No, and it's so beautiful. It's so nice to actually look after yourself. Does that mean you never, ever, ever will have a piece of cheesecake? No. That's exactly. So please, let's not.
It just means I don't eat the whole bloody thing now.
And not, cheesecake no, I've got a very varied diet. I've got chocolate cheesecake in the morning, followed by vanilla cheesecake at lunchtime, followed by, you get the idea. Balance. No, balance, exactly. So, and if I nowadays decide to splurge, if I nowadays decide to have a pizza rather than a chicken breast with some veggies, then I actually say, it's pizza time. And now I treat myself to that pizza. And it's a treat. Puts a smile on my face. No guilt. No more guilt.
None.
That shame and guilt, these evil twins, I have banned them as much as possible from my life, because I know that I get to make choices. This is an opportunity that I have, and I'll make those choices, and I will live with the consequences. And if you take that ownership over your life, then suddenly you are in such a powerful position. It's no longer other people riding you. It is no longer the thoughts of others that somehow drive your behavior. It's you. How cool is that?
We're in the driving seat.
Isn't it?
The thing is, people like you and I, we've only just realised we're in the driving seat relatively early on. And do you know what? I don't know about you, Stefan, but I get away a lot these days by saying to folk, give me a break, I'm only 8, I'm still learning.
Yes, I love it. And that's actually not a wrong thing, because emotionally, you basically stop developing the moment you start using, drinking, etc. So there are a lot of 50-year-old teenagers out there who have never learned to deal with their emotions, etc., because they have numbed everything for the last 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, and now finally they're taking that weird numb sensation away, and now they get to experience the real feelings for what they are: beautiful, horrendous, terrifying, everything that feelings and emotions are. And
I agree. I mean, I always say, these days, good, whether the day turns out to be good, bad, or indifferent, it's a blessing. And we if we're open to seeing the lessons that we are meant to learn each day, then it's always a blessing, whether it's good or indifferent or bad or whatever it is. It's seeing it. It's having the ability. It's the difference between listening and hearing, looking and seeing. There's a massive difference. Drinking and not.
So true. Oh, Sue. How can people get hold of you? Because I know you're very active out there. You're developing yourself, but you help others as well. Tell us a bit about the work you're doing.
I basically work with people who I deem to be professional swans. Now, clearly they're not swans, and most of them aren't professional in the sense that would mean in terms of their business life and so on and so forth. A professional swan is somebody who I deem to be those amongst us, myself and you included, I suspect, 8 years ago, those of us that glide serenely through life, giving the impression they don't have a care in the world, and yet underneath they're paddling like crazy just to stay afloat. The fear of being seen to be vulnerable, lacking in some way, not enough, failure, God forbid. These people I work with to help them to reframe how they see themselves, their lives, the situations, and using simple yet effective strategies, show them how to live happier, more meaningful lives without their whatever their it happens to be, whether that's addiction of some sort or the self-limiting negative beliefs and behaviors that many sober people have anyway. So I have a Facebook group called Everything Begins and Ends with You. It's a support group. It's a free group. That's on I said on Facebook, obviously, but I called it that. Everything begins and ends with you, because I realized about 6 years ago that actually it does. Everything starts in here and in here, and when we can get the mind-body connection right, we are so much more well equipped to deal with everything that life throws at us. So the stresses and the overwhelm and the imposter syndrome and the I'm not enough and saying yes when no would be more sensible. It's a big mishmash, but essentially I help people to live happier, more meaningful lives by taking responsibility for what they already have. And if they don't like it, showing them how to move from the shadows into glorious technicolor. So you can find me in my group, Everything Begins and Ends with You. You can find me at Sue Curr, SUECURR, on Facebook. There will usually be a picture of me there, this face, not the 10 dozen other Sue Currs that are out there. And if anybody actually wants to reach out to me privately, they can just reach me at suecurr@suecurr.com. Incidentally, my son said to me, Mother, you do realise that's the world's most shit email, don't you? And I said, yes, dear, but it's the only one your father can remember.
Hey,
So yeah,
isn't
but
it
I'm open to
amazing?
anybody.
Isn't it amazing? The children still, they don't focus on what you do really well, the sheer fact, the transformation, etc. What a shit email.
I'm just the mother. What do I know?
Exactly. Oh, please. See, not just in my life, but that's a complete different story. That's a different interview. I'm so pleased that we connected. I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to interview you, because you're such a force of power now, such it's just a force of nature, I should say. It's beautiful. It is. And this force, this energy comes from the willingness to be honest, to transform, to, so I guess the self-love has brought out this new you, which is just an amazing you. So Sue,
thank you. It comes back to what I was saying. I finally have the courage to be who I really am. And that would be my wish for everybody on the planet. Be who you really are. And if you need a hand, just give me a shout. Not all 7.8 billion of you at once, because my time is finite.
Exactly. And to prioritize. So we are no longer giving ourselves away left, right, and center to everyone else at the detriment of ourselves. No, it is. But here we are, guys. You have had an hour of Sue's time and an hour with me. There were so many beautiful messages in there. Just, hopefully this allows you to rethink a bit about your life and make some conscious decisions right now. When you switch off right now, you can make one decision. What will it be that changes your life, that helps you to become the person that you truly want to become? Might it be that you want to write something down? Might it be that you want to have a glass of water and rehydrate? That you have some healthy food? That you might actually say, I actually go for a walk now. And what will it be? Make the call right now when this interview finishes. Before that, however, you have one important task. There's this little subscribe button down there. Press that subscribe button, because otherwise you get so many interviews passing you by and you don't know all the gorgeous guests that are coming onto my show. And it is, I will not stop in a hurry for a long time, because it is so wonderful. I've got so many people that are great to talk to, and I'm blessed with guests like you, Sue. So thank you so much for being on my show.
My pleasure.
You guys look after yourself. Sue, you have a fantastic time in the UK. I know your vaccination is going like mad over there. So hopefully the UK soon turns the corner and you guys can come out of your lockdowns and start living a life again. Indeed. So wish it to you. And to you all out there, I wish you a fantastic day. Stay strong, guys, and look after yourself. Bye.
Bye.